My name is John Cogswell. I'm a 76-year-old average citizen from Buena Vista, Colorado. I'm running for President of the United States. I'm running to pave the way for better leaders, for renewal of love of country over personal ambition. I'm running to bring old ideas to new generations of America. These old ideas were developed by early civilizations and known by the founding fathers. They have been forgotten, but they need to be renewed. I'm here to tell you that the future of our country is entirely up to you. Who am I? I was raised on a ranch in western Kansas without electricity or running water. I went to a one-room schoolhouse next to a wheat field far from town. I went to college. While in law school, I worked for former Senator Bob Dole and later served 3 years in the United States Marine Corps, being honorably discharged as a captain. I've been practicing law ever since. I am running in Iowa only and ask its Republicans to vote for me to send a message across this fair land that it is time to take control of our country that is now being led by money and ambition. If we don't, we will witness the same tyranny Thomas Jefferson spoke about when he said that those entrusted with power will in time and by slow operation pervert that power into tyranny. To avoid this, we the people need to rise up to protect our freedom and can do this by process changes to the Constitution. And I'm here to lead that effort for myself and others. I've been asked to run by Campaign Constitution, a nonprofit corporation which I established and control. It will ask for donations. I will not. I caused it to ask me to run to spread its message for better leadership, to achieve a better tomorrow by making changes to the Constitution which prevent our elected leaders from feathering their nest and putting their reelection ahead of the country. To succeed, we need to alert the people to the importance of addressing the critical issues which are now neglected. These issues, in the collective, require the election of wise and virtuous leaders. Such leaders are those who put our country first and have no interest in their reelection. In the 57th Federalist paper, James Madison said this: "The aim of every political constitution is, or ought to be, first to obtain for rulers men who possess most wisdom to discern and most virtue to pursue the common good of the society. And in the next place, to take the most effectual precautions for keeping them virtuous while they continue to hold their public trust." We have disregarded both of these duties. So you may ask, what are wise leaders? What are virtuous leaders? And what are the most effectual precautions James Madison talked about? And how do we make them happen? Wise leaders are those who, by experience, training, and education, can make reliable predictions to the extent predictions can be made at all, and to the extent they cannot be made, to tell the people the truth. Remember, public policy is of no benefit unless it relies on reliable prediction outlining the consequences of the proposed policy. Second, virtuous leaders are those you can trust, who will tell you the unvarnished truth and who will admit mistakes when made, who will not hide information from the people or other leaders, who you can readily follow and believe in when times are tough. Third, what are those most effectual precautions we must take to have wise and virtuous leaders? We must take away the powers our elected leaders in Washington now have under the Constitution, which allow them to feather their own nest, to cause them to put the reelection above the country, and to establish unaccountable agencies which thwart the rule of law and fuel a silent tyranny. This is what Campaign Constitution is all about. This is what I'm all about. I propose to accomplish this by hosting a mock convention to wake up America to what ails this nation, to agree on process changes to our Constitution to diminish ourselves of ambition and the thirst for power and reelection, and then to seek a constitutional convention limited to what has occurred at the mock convention and approved by the states. Lastly, what are these process changes? They deal with method and not policy. Friedrich Hayek said people can agree on method because they don't know what policy decisions will result. These process changes are intended to diminish the forces of ambition and the weaknesses of human nature that generate policies for our federal leaders and bureaucrats not available to the rest of us, that are designed for the politicians, not the country, to ensure the rule of law, to impose accountability on a growing and tyrannical bureaucracy, to provide for more harmony and reverence in the process of decision-making, to honor and restore, in the words of Professor Paul Woodruff, citizen wisdom and reasoning without knowledge, to recognize the frailties of expert judgments by those who currently run our country and whose decisions, according to Professor Philip Tedlock, are less reliable than random chance. These process changes are designed to give us better leaders and affect the Constitution like restoring the foundation of an old barn. We have among us great leaders, but where are they? They are dispersed from the far corners of our country to our neighbor next door. Why do they not help govern? They are disgusted. They are disgusted with deficit spending. They are disgusted with polarization. They are disgusted with gridlock and back office deals. They are disgusted with the greed for money and power. They are disgusted with the absence of trust. They are the mockingbirds of our time, but refuse to sing. They will sing when they are welcome, when our country seeks wise and virtuous leaders. Today we have a system that seeks politicians and bureaucrats from both parties who argue over what color to paint a barn that is falling down from age and neglect, who argue over who should get the hay in the barn and how much to pitch. They are masters at financing a political agenda that preserves and expands the accumulation of their power and prestige to manage this barn. They pay no attention to the condition of the barn, motivated as they are by ambition, reelection, power, and greed. This happens because the Founding Fathers assumed that the elected leaders in a republic would act for their country and not for themselves. Not foreseeing the many changes that have eased the path of ambition, they unwittingly conferred upon our federal politicians and bureaucrats powers which are enabling the restoration of tyranny right before our eyes. Unmentioned in any of our current national debate is how to rebuild the barn to make it last for successive generations. One reason for this is that we, the people, are deluded into thinking that the issues presented by politicians and reinforced by the press and media are the real issues to be voted on. But they are not. How could they be when the current process guarantees that political winners will represent their political party's invested interests more faithfully than they will represent the citizens who elected them? The path to tyranny began when those entrusted with the barn started pitching hay, initially gathered for noble purposes like the common defense and the perfection of a more perfect union. They started pitching hay to groups of people whose favor could assure their reelection. But the people weren't stupid. They lined up with their hands out. The smart ones organized groups to look out for their interests. They hired lobbyists who snuck in the back door to cut a special deal. The legislators, in turn, concerned mostly with their own reelection, slipped verbiage into laws to help special constituents without telling the people. Before long, the process of pitching hay to the people became so important to the management of the barn that the politicians convinced the farmers to give them more hay to pitch in exchange for IOUs. They then handed out this hay to those they believed deserve it. In other words, to those they believed would vote for them. In the meantime, the barn is weakened. Yet none of the politicians or bureaucrats discuss the importance of a sound foundation to sustain the barn. Rather, they continue to argue what color this barn should be painted and who is to get the hay, and keep their fingers crossed that the barn will not fall down while they were in it, pitching hay in ways to promote their own ambition. Can we reverse this infectious process? Yes, but it won't be easy. The legislators and the media, if they comment at all, assure the people that any effort to fix the barn is as futile as pitchforking water. The beginning is like the first piece of dirt in a dust storm. I'm that first piece of dirt, and you are the storm. It's time to fix the barn. This work can begin with the people of Iowa. Voting for me for president, this will send a message to the whole country that we are being duped by the current process into believing the color of the barn and where the hay is pitched are the central issues, when the real issues are what will happen, what tyranny might arise when the barn falls down. Think about it. By voting for me, this famous state of Iowa will send this message to the whole country. We need better leaders. Ambition is the cause of injustice. Leadership and not policy debate is the issue of our time. Good leaders in any party will work together for our Constitution to make the best decision they can for the whole country. We can no longer trust the policy issues raised by our existing leaders. It is time to rid ourselves of those leaders who won't vote for the best interests of our country. There are no new ideas on policy which can help us when our foundation is collapsing. The millions of dollars spent by the politicians and big money interests to obtain your approval is a waste. It is time to use the ballot box to effectuate a lawful revolution and send our federal leaders packing. Right now, the barn is a nice place to make money, to have cradle-to-grave benefits, to get on TV, to improve chances for a reelection, and to sell books and speeches for money. But the barn is growing weaker and weaker from neglect and will fall down unless restructured. I have stepped forward to represent that class of leaders who refuse to sing. I pale in virtue and wisdom compared to the great many of them among us. So why do I run for this high office? I was inspired by an unknown influence to have the courage to do so. This courage, I might add, is like that of Atticus Finch, who in his classic book, To Kill a Mockingbird, said, "Courage is when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway and see it through no matter what." What distinguishes me from all the other candidates? They are running to convince you that their policies are better than those either of the Democrats or other Republican candidates. While they run for policy, I run for process. I am running to improve the way we make decisions by doing the necessary constitutional engineering that will, in the end, generate leaders who will work together to adopt sound public policy. For example, there is no reason our politicians cannot deal with the problem of immigration, the need for tax reform, the excessive debt which accumulates daily, but they don't because they are afraid they will not be reelected. In fact, if our present leaders did the right thing today, it is likely most of them would lose in the next election. They do not have the courage to follow this course. These candidates rarely discuss whether their proposals are affordable, whether unaffordable programs should be repealed, and whether the beneficiaries of federal largesse will overwhelm the greater portion of Americans with unexpected burdens and destroy the wealth creation process. They do not discuss that our government debt today is larger than anything in our experience from the time we became a country. They do not discuss what will happen to us when we cannot pay our debts. They do not discuss the everyday normalization of deficit spending, which they justify today not by governmental investments such as highways, commuter trains, bridges, or the defense of our country, but to fund private consumption. They focus on what policies they support to obtain your vote. They don't talk about process. They don't understand that voting, majority rule, and elected representatives are not democracy. Voting is meaningless unless you have control over what you are voting for. Majority rule is tyranny when it works without reverence and understanding for the minority. Elected representatives are worthless when they are bought off by ambition and self-interest. Our politicians don't understand what is clear for all to see. Public policy is initiated by decisions, and all decisions are based upon predictions. And when predictions are governed by ambition rather than love of country, they are corrupt. The incentive to misrepresent their consequences is high, and those of questionable integrity will frankly make up the facts to support the proposals they think will generate public support. This is called demagoguery. They do not dare tell you that they have established a country which can no longer produce goods and services without the printing of money, called quantitative easing. A country which will fall apart when the printing of money stops. A country which is held together by a thread called public confidence in the dollar. A country whose policies, not properly attended, will kindle riots and burning of buildings and the gnashing of teeth. I'm here to remind you of what Madison told us and to explain what has to be done to shake loose the ambitious leaders we have and restore in their place those wise and virtuous ones envisioned by Madison. And so here I am. Please hear what inspiration calls me to say, to lay before you the remedy to our country's ills, not by enacting more laws or spending more money or doing those things which fuel ambition, but to change the process. You have heard my message. Now, what is it I want you to do? First, I want you to vote for me in all official polls you have. There are about 20 persons running for the presidency, making it difficult to determine the person who will ultimately become the nominee. You have been wrong before, and I ask you not to waste your vote, but to vote for me and be the first state to send a message to America that it's time to wake up and take those actions which influence better leaders to come out of their places of disgust, to manage our country, and to work together for the good of the country rather than their own ambition. Second, I ask that you open my website at campaignconstitution.com and vote on the proposed amendments I have set forth. At this time, there are 44 clauses in 9 different amendments. 39 of these have a voting approval record of 90% or above. 2 are at 89%, and the remaining 3 are in the 70% category. None of them is below 70%. If you do not like them, vote against them. We need to know what America thinks. You need to know what changes are required to renew the quality of our leadership. Third, please tell your friends that you have finally a chance to put an end to the rhetoric of politicians and vote for a leader who will take action to make our country better for all of us, who has no ambition to be president, whose fundamental interest is complying with the injunction of James Madison to take those most effectual precautions to obtain wise and virtuous leaders, and to wake up America to the realization that time is running out as the grinding forces of mismanagement of government are eroding our ability to overcome the cancerous tyranny that is besetting us. Lastly, I urge you to make a contribution to Campaign Constitution to help it finance the $60,000 budget it is obligated to incur as a condition to my agreement to promote its cause and run for president. In his State of the Union address in 1963, John F. Kennedy said, "The tides of human freedom are in our favor, but we are not lulled by the momentary calm of the sea or somewhat clear skies above. We know the turbulence that lies below and the storms that are beyond the horizon. Now, more than 50 years later, the turbulence that then lied below has surfaced, and the storms then beyond the horizon are now in our midst. The forms we need will not happen unless we, the people, make them happen. The Constitution tells us how to do it. Our mission is clear. The window is narrow. Time is short. Our freedoms are at risk. And so I exhort you, vote for John Cogswell. Tell your Democrat friends to vote for me. Be bipartisan and vote for the Constitution. Vote for process changes to preserve the Constitution and this fair land. Vote for America by voting for me. I count, and so do you. Thank you.